All right, so domain and range we've talked about plenty of times, and the definitions haven't changed at all. The domain of a function are all the possible inputs or x values. The range are all the possible outputs or y values. I'm sure by now you've noticed that there tends to be patterns with domain and range. When you're talking about linear functions, it's always going to be all real numbers for both domain and range, unless it's a specific scenario where it's restricted for some reason. When we're talking about quadratics, your domain was always all real numbers. Your range depended on that minimum or maximum and where that vertex was placed, and whether it was opening up or down. With exponential functions, we're going to have a pattern. Again, your domain, remember, is what am I allowed to plug into this x? Are there any values that won't work, that'll give me an error? And the answer is no, there aren't any values that won't work, which means your domain is once again going to be all real numbers. Remember that all real numbers can be written a whole lot of different ways. You will sometimes see it just written out in words. Those are for the non-lazy people in the world. I am not one of them. You will sometimes see it written with this little symbol. That's my favorite because it's the quickest. You will sometimes see it with set notation, which looks like this, or with interval notation, which would look like this. They all mean the same thing. Okay, so I think on the key for your practice, I put one of the four, and I tried to change it up a little bit and have different ones. So just be aware that that any of these are the same thing. And if you wrote all real numbers, but I wrote the little fancy R, that's fine. That doesn't mean anything is wrong. The domain of this one is going to be exactly the same. So I can just copy and paste all of this because this thing goes forever to the right. There's no smallest x value that I can put in, and it goes forever to the left and then forever to the right. There's no biggest x value I can put in. It continues to go forever and ever. There never hits a point where I say, oh, look, there's not an output for that value. All right, the range is a bit different. We're still going to have a pattern, but it's going to be a bit more restricted because remember, with exponential functions, you have this line that is approached but never touches. Well, if this is approaching this y value of 0 but never gets there, then that means it's never going to have a y value of 0. It also means it's never going to have a y value of -1 or -2 or anything below 0. So my range then is going to be from 0 to positive infinity. It's going to keep going up forever. Now, again, we can write this in lots of different ways. The way I wrote it the first time is probably the least popular. You might also see it written like this, where we say 0 is the smallest, positive infinity is the highest. Notice that I did not put an equal to there because it's not going to equal 0. I can't say that enough times. It's never going to get to 0. Also, a popular way is to just say, all right, y is greater than 0, which implies that it's going to keep going up to positive infinity because it's just everything greater than 0. It just goes and goes and goes forever. So you might see it written that way. It's the same thing. Okay, this one is a bit different. So my smallest, let's just do it this way first. You always want your smallest value and then your highest value. Well, my smallest possible y value, this is going down and it's going to continue going down forever. So my smallest is negative infinity. My highest is 3.999999999, which means it is approaching 4, not equal to 4. 4 is that boundary line. Okay, so this would be my preferred way of writing it. You may also see it written just as y is less than 4. It's going to be anything less than 4, which again implies that it's going down to negative infinity, but it can be anything less than 4. And then also you could always write it with the little parentheses. And notice that it's going to be parentheses on both because, again, it's never going to be equal to negative infinity. It's never going to be equal to 4. All right. Go ahead and stop. I know it's tempting to just go ahead and watch the next video because I'm so delightful, but go ahead and stop and do these practice. Make sure you really understand it before we start adding more information. On the key, I did put different, I wrote it in different ways. So just be aware of that, that if you write the little R every time, that might not be the format that I use in the answers. All right, so good luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in just a minute on the next video.